Hey guys, how's it going? It's LaBelle Miller here with a special video version of the Brave Way podcast covering Johnathan Ivey's Cage Fighting Championships 10 that is happening this Saturday, June 26th in Clarksville, Tennessee. I'll have the link to get tickets as well as the location in the description box once this video is posted. Ivey and I conversed shortly after CFC 9. Discussing about this event, different things we wanted to do, because I wouldn't be able to compete on that card. For you guys that do not know, I am the third ranked super heavyweight for the organization. So what I'll be doing on this video is I'm actually only going to be covering the 4 title fights. If time allows it, I will be doing the remainder of the card, or at least a couple things about the card later this week. If times allows, based off other things that I have going on here. But I wanted to make sure that I did the one for the 4 title fights. Because there's going to probably be a lot of moving and shaking when CFC 11 happens this fall. Another quick side note, it is raining. So if you hear anything over there, I ain't got no fancy setup. Just my cell phone I'm recording on. So if you end up hearing any other audible noises or things like that, it is what it is. So like I said, CFC 10, Vasquez versus Pirat is happening this Saturday with the 4 title fights. Covering that fight first. So Jaime Vasquez is a teammate of mine. He's undefeated in the CFC, and all his fights have been title fights. He has won them all. He hasn't finished any of his opponents in the title fights, if I can remember very well off the top of my head going here. But he has had dominant performances. I haven't seen any 10-8 rounds happen in the CFC, but if you argue his last title fight against Johnathan Salvato, he probably should have had a 10-8 there. Not going to say 10-7, that'd be a little bit excessive. But after the first round, the fights wasn't really that much competitive. I mean, the same thing around his first title fight when he did fight a Jason Baker. Somebody else that I've had the pleasure of training alongside of him as well. But anyway, so give you kind of a little background about Jaime. Jaime is a well-rounded mixed martial artist. He excels on the ground as well he does on the feet. He bounces around to a couple different gyms to try to get the best look and the best style for him, something that you see a lot of professionals end up doing. He's a veteran of over 10 fights. I think it's close to 15 or something at this point. So he's been there, he's done that. He's not necessarily afraid. George Pirat is a younger guy in his career. He has fought very well. He definitely, his last performance against Zach Lozano when at CFC 9 shows that during the pandemic that happened, what is still ongoing, but he was in the gym working on things to make sure he has continued success as he's progressing. His volume is like close to second to none work rate wise, competing against other people. And he never stops. So like if he's on you the entire time. And that's something that he'll be able to take advantage of during the fight, because Jaime typically starts off a little bit slower than what you would like to see in most competitors of doing a filling out process and things like that. With Pirat's style, he is willing to go in. Of course, he's not going to go in there recklessly, but he's going to go in there and start touching you and then start seeing what strikes work. And by that I mean he attacks the body, he attacks the head as well as the legs with all of his strikes. Very great striker in that aspect, especially with the volume, because he's not trying to kill you with each shot he's out there throwing. He's just making sure he's throwing enough that you feel each of it, feel each one, and you have to respect everything, and you don't have time to sit there and breathe as he continues to apply pressure on you that way. Hami, on the other hand, has been able to drop people with his hands as well as his kicks. And he also has really good takedowns, really good grappling. This fight at 155 pounds, this will be the second one, I believe, if I'm correct, for Pirat. And this is, and Hami has bounced back and forth between 145 and 155, but he's stayed at 155 as of recently. So I don't think there's going to be a really big size difference there because George Pirat has fought at 145 pounds quite a few times, like I did mention. And of course, Hami was the champion at 145 until he bumped up to 155. So these guys are going to be relatively the same size whenever they get into that cage. The things that I don't see will be the difference makers in this fight is like what I kind of already mentioned. Pirat's aggressiveness overall and just continually peppering people with shots the entire time to fight, it's going to make you hard to set up your own offense, right? And the thing about it is it's not like he's going to go out there and make a mistake or throw something blind where he can't get taken down, where I believe that Hami does have a very distinct advantage of. When you saw George fight Bo Williams a couple years ago in the CFC, Bo was able to implement his wrestling and be able to control George on the ground the entire time. I'm sure that George is not the same fighter that he was then, especially volume-wise, he's not. And so I believe if he is taken down, he'll be doing everything he needs to do to be able to get back to his feet or sweep to a more dominant position, or look to submit from his back. Hami as well, he will, if the fight isn't going his way on the feet, he will go for the takedown, and he'll be looking to control a lot of the things there. If you have seen Hami fight in other organizations, the issue that he does have with his grappling, because it is so good, if he is taken down, so let's say Pirat decides he wants to shoot a takedown and try to control the fight from there, Hami is comfortable staying on his back because he knows he's so good at it. However, in amateurs, you don't have 5-minute rounds. You have 3. So if you end up getting taken down around, a minute and a half in the first round or so, that doesn't look good for the judges to be on your back for that long, even if you're attacking or you're doing everything else. So being taken down and not being able to get back up to your feet or to really do a lot of effective attacking hurts more than it helps. That. And so that goes for both fighters. So if you get taken down, you have to continuously move and continuously try to do something on top, and you can't just wait it out. But so with all that being said, and keeping it into everything into a core, if Pirat is able to stuff the takedowns and be able to use his volume striking over the course of 3 rounds, I believe he can get it done. However, if it's a situation to where Hami can land a couple good power shots, because he does have, I believe he does have the power advantage in this contest, or he's able to initiate his grappling, I do believe that he will be able to prevail and get the job done. As it already been seen before, or actually speaking of this before, Alexander Shank, who's the fighter I'm about to speak of next, is a teammate of Pirat, and so he probably has already discussed the power that Vasquez has. Is it something to be worried about or not to worry about, as well as control in certain positions when they're on the ground. So they've already have all that. And then the good thing also in the stable of Harris Holt, which is the academy that they fight for, they have seen, like I said, Hami has already fought one of their teammates before. He was scheduled to fight another one of his teammates until he was injured. And then there's just a lot of film out there about Hami because of how many amateur fights he has. You don't really see a lot of people have as many amateur fights as he currently has anymore. Typically, if you're doing pretty well, maybe about 4 or 5 fights, you've already turned pro. Especially with Hami's age. Hami is, I think, around 33 or 34, so he's definitely one of the older people that have competed in all of the CFC in that regard. Obviously, they're going to come in with a great game plan. That's a Harris Holt team. And the Academy, which is what like I said, my stable, and Hami Fights Aware, be coming out with a great game plan to obviously negate this. I believe it'll be a really good fight. However, it does shake out, and I'm very interested in seeing if Pirat was able to do something that Alexander was not. And the reason why I bring that up as we're nice caveat to this next fight, Alexander Sheikh versus Malik McCullough for the featherweight championship here at the CFC. Alexander Sheikh, as going back a little bit, we look at Hami as the GOAT of the CFC because, like I said, 5-0, 5 title fights, right? Kind of unheard of. Well, especially it's a newer organization. We've had titles change hands a few times. The people who have fought as frequently as Hami has fought for the organization. But Alexander Sheikh probably has the best skill set out of everybody in the CFC. Every person that I've seen, so I guess go back like this. Shank received the rub from fighting Hami. And by that, I mean, people don't kind of like think about things like that because they had a very close fight. Hami did win, I believe it was by split decision. And let me see if I can fact check that real fast if they have it on here. No, it was unanimous. At least that's what it listed as. I thought it was probably a split, depending on how the fight went. I had Hami winning the first and the third, and Shank easily winning the second. Alexander, since he fought Hami, has started off faster in every single fight that he has. And the reason why that's important is if he would have started off his first round, how he started off his second round against Hami, if he would have did that in his first round, it's possible, and I know more than likely it would have been true, that Shank would have been looked at as the GOAT of the CFC. Everybody he has fought outside of Hami has been looked in shock on how good Alexander's striking is. So he comes from a traditional karate background, I do believe. He is a black belt in karate. And so he throws a lot of strikes that none of these guys at the amateur level really see. A lot of people just try to do a lot of traditional boxing. You do some kickboxing, you do a little bit of Muay Thai, but you don't really do too much of that because you cannot, in Tennessee, you're not allowed to elbow and you're not allowed to use knees. So more or less, all of your fighting ranges, most of the things you do are very common that you see in kickboxing fights that you will see in MMA. Alexander has the ability, because of his dexterity and his legs and stuff too, to throw different types of spinning attacks, axe kicks, things like that. And then because of the karate style, and I'm assuming, don't know, that he did point fighting or stuff like growing up, he's used to doing blitzes and stuff. And you see it a lot of times in his fights. He'll sit there, he'll be on the outside, he'll throw a kick, the person backs in range, next thing you know they're against the cage, he'll throw a blitz and then he's back out, or he's cutting off another angle. You don't have that happening a lot with these other fighters. So they look lost in the sauce the entire time. So then they end up trying to wrestle him. Well, they don't know that Alexander grew up wrestling as well as doing karate. So he's very capable of defending takedowns, initiating his own takedowns if he wants to have it, or reversing the position if he wants to do that as well. And his grappling has come along very well because he's also got a submission in the CFC against a guy who was argue that he was one of the best lighter weight wrestlers that the CFC ever had fight for the organization. So Malik McCullough is this is his first stint in the CFC. He's known for fighting on Mighty UFL, Underground Fight League, and Street Beefs, of things like that. And when you look at a couple of his fights, if you watch them on YouTube, because you can find them up, I did a little bit digging, but you can find them. He has some. He doesn't. He's not like he does not know what he's necessarily doing when he's throwing strikes. By that I mean, a lot of times when you watch a lot of these street fighters throw, and it might be doing him a disservice by just calling him a street fighter. But when you see a lot of street fighters fight, or if you watch fights on the streets, you go to YouTube, you find some. Everything they do is big looping hooks, right? They're doing all this. They're throwing uppercuts from wherever, and nothing is very linear, right? Any of the strikes, and of course you barely ever see any kicks. He knocked a guy down with a roundhouse kick or spinning heel kick, more likely, in one of his more recent fights. And if he probably wasn't on grass, he may have not slipped after he connected that kick, which it looked pretty good when he did that. He does a lot of good, like parrying stuff away with his hands. He doesn't overcommit, and by overcommitting, I mean he doesn't do this as a big reaction. It's just quick things like this, and then moving his head off the center line, which I found very impressive. And then he's also fought guys of varying sizes. He will be the bigger guy, based off of, I haven't seen this guy in person. I've seen Shank in person quite a few times, but he looks like he'll be the bigger guy height-wise, not necessarily probably mass-wise, because Shank is a thicker guy for his weight class. But what I am interested in is, it doesn't look like, and as I say this, I hope I'm not jinxing the fight. I really hope I'm not jinxing the fight. McCullough looks like he probably walks around, and of course people cut weight in MMA, so that's no big thing. So he looks like he's around 100 and mid-70s, 80-ish pounds. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is, I don't know what Shank walks around at, but I'm assuming, let's give him 160-ish. I mean, like high 160s. Shank is used to cutting weight for wrestling, and I'm sure he did for his, if he did point karate, stuff, I'm sure he did there too. He's also did it in MMA. So he knows he can make 145, right? Even if it's I gotta cut a pound or something, like the day of the fight, he knows he can get to 145. Last fight, CFC 9, he was in there in a sauna suit, and he was still running around doing what he had to do to make weight. So, and a professional in that aspect, he knows what he has to do. And once again, I don't know, but what is Malik's experience cutting weight? Because if it'd be different if he walked around, and he just looks, cameras add pounds and all this other stuff that people say. So he could be smaller than what I think he is. But based it off of the people that they have had him fight, these people look like they probably weigh the same thing, maybe 160-ish, 170-ish. But once again, they're not cutting weight because it is, I'm assuming they're not cutting weight because it's backyard fights, right? But they could be, right? So I really want to see how that goes for him. And a big thing about that too is one of the fights, I didn't watch it all the way in its entirety, but the fight that he knocked the guy down with that kick, he seemed to gas. Now, the thing that was interesting about that is when he landed the kick, he ended up on top and he was in side control, but there wasn't much there in regards of a lot of attacks. So, it's always a wondering, it's like, do you focus solely on striking, which some of his strikes, like I said, did look good, wasn't looping and things like that, but how much of that do you focus on your grappling? And the guy looked like he was able to take advantage of that. Mind you, I think it was like the third-ish round, I stopped watching it. but the guy was able to get a snap down, stay in the front headlock position, and if he had any chokes, he'd be able to get him out of there. Speaking of Shank, going back to him, the finish he got was by guillotine. So if Shank gets in the same similar position, I guarantee you he'll be able to do what he needs to do to snatch the neck and get him out of there. But the bigger point is when it comes to the cardio, I don't know how long. Well, you can guess how long these rounds and stuff are. But if the fight goes long, I believe Shank will more than likely finish him, based off of the cardio issues that I have seen. Shank also had made a mention that after he won his last fight, he was going to think about turning pro. Now, I think what probably, once again, I don't know, don't speak to people on the team. What I think probably deterred him a little bit is while he did look good in that win, it wasn't probably, he didn't get the finish he wanted. And I think that that's what he's looking for, is to go out there and make a statement because, based off views matter, right? So, I don't know if Malik's going to be able to bring a huge crowd with him, but he has fights that have a decent. Let me look at the last one that I have watched at him here. He has fights for over 5,000 views. He has a couple of them that are like around 3, a couple over 5, around 5 and stuff like that. So if he has these fights, for that long, you can imagine you take that fight for Shank and you throw it on the CFC page versus Wolfpack is his nickname that he goes by. Popularity is going to skyrocket for him, for a guy who's already very popular. So anyway, just round it all out there. I believe if what I think is correct, Shank will be going to go ahead and look for the finish in this fight, and he'll try to get it done as early as he can, however he can. Based off of what I see from McCullough, he has a lot of things. He has a lot of power in his hands, power in his kicks, from what I've seen. I just worry about the cardio issue, and I also worry about the weight cutting issue. If cutting down to 45 will be a problem for him or not. And I hope not, and I hope this fight takes place. And I hope I don't jinx it. But I think that's just a thing that it comes to mind. And of course, there's a lot of stuff that I could not know. And that guy could have been walking around a lot smaller than what I thought he was. And he could have been used to cutting weight this entire time. So the next fight, Jeremiah Hill versus Sage Mullins. I fought Jeremiah Hill on CFC 4. He ended up beating me by TKO within the first round with a few seconds left, which kills me, but right, these things happen. It's Sage Mullins. Sage Mullins just came up short, fighting against Chase. I just forgot his last name. But our super heavyweight champion. And to be very honest, right, you have to think about what you see. Sage was winning that fight. Sage was weighing, I think he weighed in around 250-ish pounds for that contest. And Chase weighed in the heaviest I've ever seen him at. I've also fought Chase, and when I fought Chase, I think he was around close to 250, 256 or something like that. He wasn't that big of a guy, and he weighed in near 300 pounds. And Sage was having a lot of success on the feet, and in some of the grappling exchanges of being able to go for the takedowns and things like that. But I do believe that the size played a factor in how effective a lot of these takedowns were, or these attempts. Even though Chase didn't have the wrestling background or the credentials that Sage has, size does matter, right? So even if you don't know what you're doing, if you just weigh that much more on your opponent, especially like these heavyweight guys, it will make a big difference. So Jeremiah, and mind you, and I didn't bring this back up, but this is for the heavyweight title that is currently vacant. Jeremiah has lost 80 pounds over the past 2 years. So I think when I fought him, he was around 340-ish. So you take 80 pounds away from there, and he's probably lost a little bit more weight from then to be able to compete at the 265-pound limit for this title. Um, Jeremiah has good power in his hands, and he's willing to, once the fight starts, he's willing to go out there, he's willing to trade, he's willing to do what he has to do to sit down and bite, if I can talk, bite down on a mouthpiece and throw leather. Sage showed his huevos when he was sitting there standing in front of Chase, which is, if you guys have gone and seen, a couple years ago, there was a viral video of Chase knocking out like 5 would-be attackers at this club or whatever, right? So not a lot of people are willing to stand in front of Chase and throw hands. So when it comes down, McMullen, I had to look up his last name because I was like, I can't believe that thing is like just slipping my mind. So when it comes, the interesting about this fight to me is that Sage has made social media posts, said that he's going to be, he's walking around 230-ish right now. So he still will be giving up that weight against like Jeremiah, even though Jeremiah is also going to be taller. Jeremiah is around 6'4", 6'5" so he is taller than Chase, but Sage is a shorter guy, and he's wrestled at heavyweight when he was in high school, and he's fought MMA in his heavyweight career and super heavyweight. So he's used to fighting taller guys. So that's not, as much as that's normally a factor in for a lot of people, it's not going to be in the case of Sage because he's used to fighting these bigger and height-wise guys. What keys to victory is for Sage, can he control the fight? As in, you come in, initiate your will is a big thing, right? So Jeremiah hadn't fought in around 2 years. The last fight he had pulled out due to injury, and then he had subsequently retired from the sport at that point. And that's from conversations I had with him, saying he had some other things going on that was a bigger focus in his life right now. So he had that. So in regards of what MMA training he's been doing throughout that time, I don't know, but obviously he's been doing cardio stuff, he's been doing weightlifting stuff because he's lost all that weight. Of course, there's dietary changes involved with that as well. Sage, once again, like I said, bring it up to props to the Harris Holt team of using the pandemic to be able to work on a lot of these skills, because they also were the only organization, or one of the only teams in Tennessee that were going out of their way to find their fighters fights in like places like Florida and things like that, just to keep them as busy as possible. But they like I said, you definitely can see the hand speed combination things. A lot of that has changed, and that's what gives them a lot more confidence as they are fighting these other fighters that probably did not have the ability to do the training or to go out and actually get some more rounds under them as they're going to go fight. So anyway, if Sage can take Jeremiah down, it'll be very interesting to see how good Jeremiah is on the ground. I believe there was something a couple years ago, social media post wise, that Jeremiah had admitted that he had rolled with Sage before, and that Sage had pretty good control of him on the ground when they competed. If I'm reading into that right, I could be reading into it wrong. Or it could be the thing that a lot of people do. It's like when you're rooting for a guy that you're not competing with, but it's a training partner, you fluff up their attributes a little bit more than what you normally would do in that regard. Because once again, if it's only in the training room, only the people involved will know how that actually takes place. And as you've seen, it's like it wasn't until the second round that Sage was dropped. Ended up losing the fight at that point. He was able to sit there and stand and be able to trade and sit there and throw shots. I think this fight it'll be interesting on the pacing on how it goes, because like I said, Jeremiah hasn't fought in so long, and I don't know obviously what his sparring regimen and stuff like that is, but it's also different than actually fighting somebody who's trying to purposely KO you and stuff like that, on how fast he starts. Because at super heavyweight, he started pretty fast and all of his fights you're able to watch him do. After sitting there for a little bit, he's able to throw. Aside from the outlier when he fought Tim Johnson, another fighter on his card, it was finished quickly because he did not start relatively fast. But he starts relatively fast and then pushes the pace the entire time. I'm interested in seeing, with his smaller size, will he try to push the pace the entire time? Of course, he's getting used to this. He's in the gym. He's sparring with sparring partners. So he's getting kind of an idea. Sage, a lot of times in the past, he'll throw his combination, stay on the outside, throw the combination, get back on the outside, and then move in, look and see openings, and sit there and plot how he wants to attack. Before I say something I probably shouldn't say, I'll reserve that comment. But there are there are fights out there that you can see how Sage operates when somebody blitzes him, and how he's able to move and create angles and then do the things that he needs to do to get further success. So, and also another key thing is Sage said after this fight, he's dropping down to be fighting at light heavyweight, moving further. So that'll be really interesting, because for this fight, now mind you, that could be weighing the fall and then dropping 30 pounds or 25 pounds to make it 205. Isn't that big of a deal with enough preparation time. But it'll be interesting to see what he actually decides to weigh in at on Friday, or for this contest. And it'll also be interesting to see what Jeremiah weighs in at. And the reason why I say that is, if Jeremiah weighs in at 265, you have reason to believe that he had to cut, a little bit of weight to get there. If it's 5 pounds, if it's 10 pounds, or whatever. But if he weighs in around, I would say 255 to 260, to me that means that he has been used to staying at that weight for a longer period of time. So I don't think he'll have a lot of cardiovascular issues when it comes to, well, first of all, he probably won't because of cutting the weight and doing everything he's doing. But there is drain that happens to you even if you cut a little bit of weight just to compete in a contest. And I realize that this went a lot longer than what I planned on, but this is the stuff that y'all want to hear. Is Claude Manu versus James Mushamish, and I know I said his name wrong. I'm 100% sure I said his last name wrong. But so anyway, Claude Manu fought Ryan Driscoll at CFC 9 as well. He was having success. Unfortunately, Ryan had a terrible injury that happened to his knee, so Claude ended up winning by a TKO, and it's not taking away anything that Claude did. He caused the injury by his pace and pressure and stuff like that he was doing. So it wasn't a situation to where he just, like Ryan just like slipped on a banana peel that just appeared in the middle of the ring. So I want to make sure I give Claude that respect. James fought for the CFC quite a few years ago. If I can go back to his thing, I believe it was CFC 9. Fought James Harrison. I mean, not 9, 7. CFC 7 versus James Harrison. The interesting thing about that contest was it was 170 pounds. This is for the middleweight title, so he's going up to 185. So I wonder now. The last time I seen James, if I got it right in my head, him and Claude are about the same height. Different builds. Claude's a little bit thicker, but they're around the same height. And I wasn't at CFC 7, so I don't remember. I don't even remember the face-off between him and James. I like seeing their picture off my head, so I don't know the height different wise. I just find it very interesting that James has came back and is fighting up a weight class. James is currently, like I think I said that already, but just in case I didn't, he is the CFC's welterweight champion at this time. And James lost by unanimous decision. And if I'm right by things I have remember reading in the past, it wasn't necessarily as too close. That's one would believe. I've trained with Claude before. We actually trained together at the beginning of CFC 9 for his MMA debut. He did have a kickboxing fight in the fall of 2020. So he was working with us for a lot of different things. We did some grappling stuff together. We sparred before or whatever. So Claude has, he trains with Legion. Is the gym he trains out of. Legion Jiu-Jitsu in Hendersonville. So he has a well-rounded group of people around him that helps him work on his grappling and work on his striking and stuff like that. I believe his father, if I'm correct, was an Olympian. I can't remember in what discipline, but it was a combat sports related discipline. So I think it may have been judo, if I remember right. So he has that that background in him, that Olympic background, like of knowing what to do, what to train for, what to expect, and things like that. James has not fought, from what I've seen. He may have did some other things, but he's not fought since CFC 7. So I want to know what he's been working on during this time frame. I believe he was training out of Renzo Gracie, Clarksville, from his last fight. So is he still working on a lot of his jiu-jitsu, a lot of his game in that regard? That being said, it's like, so Legion is really, they've integrated a lot of good kickboxers and stuff in their program. And if you notice, or if you see a lot of their guys fight now, you wouldn't even know they came from a jiu-jitsu gym because they don't look for the takedown right away. Even with a gym full of good wrestlers that they train with all the time, they're willing to stand and trade and throw hands with anybody. So, but if you go to the ground with them, they're adept at that realm as well. So, if I was right about James' training background, it'll be interesting to see how this fight's contested. Because one, like I said, James is going up 15 pounds, which will be very interesting in its own right. Claude, this is his, if I'm correct, third combat fight, and that's including his Muay Thai fight he had, as well as his first MMA fight. So his third combat fight, he's already fighting for a title, which lets you know how high that the CFC thinks of him and thinks what his ceiling can be. Like I said, minimum before, knew before, all around great guy, all around ground skill set. So all that, really X's and O's with this contest is figuring out the unknown, that what James is going to bring to the table. James could have been spending this entire time that he has stepped away and worked drastically on his striking, and which makes things a lot more interesting on his feet. Or he could have just came more of a ground specialist and may have different type of dynamic entries into takedowns and things like that. A big thing too is that since this is Claude's, well, this is also, if I'm right, it would be James's third combat sports fight, or I'm sorry, third MMA fight, and Claude's second MMA fight. The jitters, I know for sure for Claude won't be there. He had a big following that go with him to CFC 9. He'll have, I'm sure, the same or even a larger following that goes with him to a CFC 10 up there in Clarksville. So he's not going to be worried about a lot of this stuff, and he'll be ready to go in that aspect. And James, it'll be interesting to see what he's did with his time off. I know Claude has been working a lot with, like since he was in my head MMA coach, at the academy, as well as a couple of the other guys that we fight on this card that hopefully I can get to you guys and preview with at the end of at the end of this week as well. So there you have it. In regards to covering these 4 title fights, hopefully I gave you a lot of information that you guys did not know, or different ways, aspects of looking into the fight. Just like a little housekeeping note for myself. I, I have some health things that I got going on, which is why I'm not on this car. And I may not also be able to be on a car in the fall. Of course, it's not what you guys came here for, but I decided I might as well throw this tidbit out there for you too, because I got to get a lot of this stuff taken care of. That was uncovered during my last fight camp before I'm willing to throw myself back out there into the cage or competing in grappling aspect of that as well. So typically you do housekeeping notes at the beginning. I did it at the end because if you guys are still here checking it out, that means that you care about the products and stuff that I do. And then I got to keep my podcast and stuff like that upcoming. So anyway, thank you for taking the time for checking this out. Share this around. The page that you see this on is my Lavelle 37 mode Miller page. And I may end up throwing it on my main page as well. Because I got to get back to putting a lot more content on there and everything. I'm sure that the CFC is going to have some other things up for you, little treats and tidbits by the end of this week they'll have for you. So anyway, thank you for checking this out. Like I said, I know it's a long-winded video, but that's how I typically do a lot of these things. And this is how you become legendary and greatness is earned.